Welcome to the channel. This is Oblivion, and in today's FEH Report we are going to discuss PvP versus PvE in Fire Emblem Heroes. Originally I was going to cover this topic in one video, but it was way too long, so I'll be breaking it up into two parts. A very common sentiment is that FEH is a PvP focused game, and I wanted to break down that argument and see just how true it is. So I'm going to be breaking down all the game modes, analyzing their difficulty, availability, and lastly the rewards they offer. Now before we jump into the subject itself, let's make sure everyone is on the same page. So let's go over what PvP and what PvE is and what game modes in FEH fall into each category. PvP is player versus player, and PvE is player versus environment, or essentially playing against the AI. Fire Emblem Heroes is an unusual game that actually has a weird mix of PvP and PvE game modes. So let's look at this chart so we can determine where game modes fall. So on top we have true PvP game modes. These are game modes where you are directly playing against another person, and the only mode that falls in this category is Summoner Duels, including Summoner Duels Ranked and SDS. Underneath that we have AI PvP. These are game modes where you directly face other players' teams or units, but they are controlled by the AI. This category includes Ether Raids, Arena, Arena Assault, Pawns of Loki, Grand Conquest, and Voting Gauntlet. Under that we have ranking modes, where you don't directly play against other players' units or teams, but you do compete in rankings based off how well you perform or how well your team scores. This category includes Resonant Battles, Allegiance Battles, Mjolnir Strikes, Tempest Trials, Roker Sieges, and Frontline Phalanx. Then lastly we have true PvE game modes, where you only play against AI and there is no ranking system. The goal of these modes is just to complete the content, and once you do, you are done. So now that we've categorized all the modes, if we look at the PvP and PvE game mode chart once again, we can see that there are only 3 true PvP game modes while there are 9 true PvE game modes. But if we include the AI PvP or ranking game modes, then it becomes much less clear. Strictly speaking, if we just count the game modes, then FEH has more PvE gameplay, but I don't think that is a fair comparison, as it doesn't take into consideration how often these game modes are available, and also it doesn't take into account difficulty. Difficulty may seem like a weird variable to consider, but difficulty often lends itself to higher time investment in that mode. For example, we have Frontline Phalanx, a game mode where there is no difficulty whatsoever and takes essentially no time. If we compare that to something like Ether Raids, which has some of the higher difficulty in the game, it takes a considerable amount of time when you include team building and gameplay. It quickly becomes clear that not every game mode is made equal and cannot be considered of the same value. So let's break down all the game modes into different levels of difficulty first. Now obviously this is a subjective list based off my own opinion. For other people this list may look different, but I will try to remove as much bias as possible. I'll explain the tiers from bottom to top. First we have the non-existent tier. This tier consists of game modes that have no difficulty whatsoever, and in my opinion, no gameplay. Above that we have the easy tier. This tier consists of game modes that do have gameplay, but are essentially extremely simple maps that anyone can beat. After that we have the normal tier, which is composed of game modes that have fun gameplay, but not so difficult that much thought is needed to beat them. Hard tier is composed of games that require some team planning or unit building in order to succeed. Lunatic is a tier where the game not only requires decent teams, but also specific units, be that from specific games or merge pair-up legendaries. The only reason Allegiance Battles is this high is because it can be quite difficult for players without a few merged up legendaries to hit max score. Infernal is the tier where I think true difficulty begins. For me at least, everything below this tier is easy and doesn't require much time, but Infernal demands units built for these game modes and an expansive barracks. Years ago, Arena wouldn't be anywhere near this high, but thanks to the absurd new legendaries we've gotten, Arena can actually be a bit annoying nowadays, especially when you are running into +10 duochroms every single match. Lastly, we have Abyssal tier, and this is where the game modes that are by far the most difficult in the game reside. The true PvP game modes. In all honesty, I would say that Abyssal tier is actually like 2 tiers more difficult than Infernal. The jump in difficulty from Ether Raids to SDR is massive. As you can see just by looking at this tier list, PvP dominates difficulty in Fire Emblem Heroes. The highest difficulty true PvE game mode we have is the legendary Abyssal maps. The amount of time a player has to invest in something like an Abyssal legendary map can't even compare to the amount of time needed for Ether Raids or Summoner Duels. Now I'm not trying to equate time investment to enjoyment. Everyone enjoys different things, and I'm sure everyone has different favorite game modes. But if someone did want to play for several hours, many of the PvE game modes lack the amount of content or depth needed to let a player invest that much time. Abyssal maps or allegiance battles only take 15 to 30 minutes max to beat, and this brings me to the second variable I want to discuss, game mode availability. Let's go through each game mode and discuss how often the game mode has new content or is even available to play, so we can get a better idea of how much FEH prioritizes PvP or PvE. On the top of the chart, we have game modes that are playable every day or have new content each day. Now, Summoner Duels is a game mode you can play every day and gets unique matches, but the rewards are only available once, so it is in a unique position. On the other hand, we have Ether Raids. We get 70 Ether every day, which means you can play at least one match of AR every single day if you want to. Next, we have the every week game modes. These are the game modes you need to complete at least one time per week in order to get max rewards. In this category, we have Arena, Rival Domains, and Resident Battles. Under that, we have modes that alternate every other week. In this category, we have Arena Assault, Allegiance Battles, and new story maps. When it comes to the story, we typically get new maps with a new banner, and the amount is different depending if they are main story chapters or paralog chapters. We also get some additional content in the form of multi-map battles. Next, we have modes that appear about 2 to 3 times a month, which would be Mjolnir Strikes and Pawns of Loki. Then we have our monthly game modes or events such as SDR, SDS, Voting Gauntlet, Hall of Forums, Abyssal Maps, Limited Hero Battles, Hero's Journey, Tempest Trial, and Forging Bonds. Then in our Wars category, we have modes that only show up every 2 to 3 months, though sometimes it can be more. This category includes Lost Lore, Roker Sieges, Frontline Phalanx, Grand Conquest, and Tap Battle. Now, something I want to address very quickly is that technically you can play story maps whenever you want, as much as you want, but I don't consider that real content outside the first time you beat it, as there is very little reason to beat those maps multiple times outside the different difficulties. Okay, with that out of the way, let's discuss what is available more often than not. Just by looking at the chart, it's obvious that PvP game modes are much more available. Ether Raids is the only game mode with a reason to be played every single day. Weekly game modes consist of one PvP game mode, one PvE game mode, and one ranked mode. The bi-weekly game modes follow the same pattern, and the game modes that run 2 to 3 times a month are both ranked modes. Now, when it comes to the monthly modes, this is where PvE starts to pop up a lot more. Typically in Fire Emblem Heroes, we have some event always active, and there are a ton of great PvE events like Forging Bonds, Abyssal Maps, or Hall of Forums. Lastly, we have those rare game modes that show up a few times a year like Grand Conquest or Tap Battle. So when it comes to availability, there actually is a good mix of PvE and PvP available at all times. But I would say PvP still has a major advantage here, and that goes back to my argument about time investment. If we look at the most available PvE game mode, Rival Domains, and the main story quests, they have something in common. They lack depth. Rival Domains is so easy you can auto battle it and takes almost no investment or time, and the same can be said of the main story. The main story does have newer units in it, so sometimes the map may catch you off guard, but for the most part, it's very easy. Not only that, the amount of actual storytelling is very limited. We're talking about 10 to 20 sentences per map of text. Even if a player reads everything and manually plays every map, we're talking about 20 to 30 minutes of content every 2 weeks. Now, if we compare that to the highest available PvP game modes, Ether Raids and Summoner Duels, there is no contest when it comes to the amount of content or time investment. Building an Ether Raids or SD team can take hours of planning, practice, and unit building. That's not even including the actual time for the gameplay. AR matches can take anywhere from 3 minutes to an hour for the most difficult maps, though the escape ladder has made it easier to avoid those hour-long maps. Summoner Duels is an intense game mode that can easily take 20 minutes per match when you are up against a good opponent. Once again, I want to reiterate, time investment doesn't equate to fun, but it does show how much depth a game mode has and how much development has been invested into that game mode. And this isn't only true when it comes to the most available game modes, but even to many events. Many of the monthly PvE and ranked events are very simple. Tempest Trial and Forging Bonds are essentially auto-battled by everyone. Hero's Journey and Voting Gauntlet have little actual gameplay, which is fine. The point I'm trying to make is it's clear that IS is putting an emphasis on PvP game modes. But let's look at one last variable before I conclude my argument. Rewards. Now, rewards are a massive part of any game. They keep people playing. They encourage people to do their best and to push for those high ranks. So let's look at the different types of rewards available in Fire Emblem Heroes. We have orbs, easily the most valuable reward in the game. Then we have things like feathers, which are the most common reward, but also very necessary as they are needed to upgrade units to 5 stars. There are sacred coins, another valuable reward that allows players to create and upgrade sacred seals, refining stones, and divine dew, which allow players to refine their weapons. Then we have dragon flowers that allow players to power up their character stats, and lastly divine codes, which allow players to get valuable skills to inherit to units or even merges to particular units. Now obviously there are a ton of other rewards like badges, blessing, and arena medals, but in all honesty, these are less valuable for the most part. So when it comes to looking at rewards, we can't just look at it based off category, because that isn't completely correct. As you can see, game modes like Voting Gauntlet are technically AI PvP game modes, but they are so ridiculously easy, anyone who participates will get a majority of the rewards. The same could be said for something like Tempest Trials, where this is technically a ranking mode, but the ranking only affects the amount of feathers you get. So for the rewards infographics, I'll be splitting them into PvP modes and modes with rankings that drastically affect your rewards. And on the other hand, I'll have PvE modes with easy events where everyone will get a majority of the rewards. We'll be looking at the rewards on a monthly basis, as it was the easiest denominator with both minimum and maximum rewards. I won't include modes that show up rarely like Tap Battle, Grand Conquest, and also I won't be including base Summoner Duels, as the rewards can only be received once. With all that out of the way, here is the monthly PvP rewards. As you can see, there's a large emphasis on endgame materials like Grails, Divine Codes, Dragon Flowers, and Trait Fruits. PvP game modes also have large variances between the minimum rewards and the maximum rewards, and this is due to the fact that all PvP modes have ranks attached to them, with some also having tiers as well. Now let's take a look at monthly PvE rewards, and in this case we can see there's a large emphasis on orbs, feathers, and sacred coins. You also notice that there's a very minor variance in the minimum and maximum rewards compared to PvP. That is due to the fact most PvE rewards come from events like Tempest Trials, Forging Bonds, and Pawns of Loki. While there are some rankings attached to these events, they typically only affect the amount of feathers received. Now I think if you ask most people which rewards they prefer, they'd probably choose the PvE rewards just due to the fact that there are more orbs there. But let's look at a direct comparison so we can get a better perspective of the differences. Let's start with the feathers. Both modes offer a generous amount of feathers, which makes sense as it is one of the key currencies that allow us to promote units. But PvE not only offers more, but also has a higher floor, meaning it requires less work to obtain those feathers as well. This makes sense as new players desperately need feathers to get their accounts going and start building units in order to be used in more complex game modes. Next we have Dragon Flowers, and this is where PvP blows PvE out the water. For the sake of time and my sanity, I combined all the Dragon Flower rewards into one currency. But as you can see, PvP offers enough Dragon Flowers to get essentially +5 to either 1 or 2 units, while PvE doesn't even offer enough to get +3 on a single unit. The difference is drastic, and I think this is largely due to the fact that Dragon Flowers are an endgame currency. They are there to further improve favorites or core units. Next we have Divine Codes, and once again PvP destroys PvE in this category. Unfortunately, Divine Codes are a currency that new players could desperately use, but because they give access to such premium fodder, Intelligent Systems ties them to more difficult content such as Ether Raids, Summoner Duels, and even limited hero battles. After that we have Refining Stones, and this is a more even match. High-ranking PvP players will be able to get more Refining Stones, but essentially it's only an additional refine a month, which isn't the biggest deal. After that we have Divine Dew, a resource needed for those premium preference weapon refines, and both sides do about equal here. After that we have Sacred Coins, and PvE surprisingly does well here. I honestly expected this to be PvP favored with modes like Arena Assault offering a good amount, but PvE actually proved to give a good amount of these coins out per month. This is good news for new players, as Sacred Coins will be one of the biggest limiting factors to a new account that needs to create Sacred Seals on top of upgrading them. Our next currency is one of the most premium, Heroic Grails. Heroic Grails are so important because it allows for account progression in the form of highly merged free-to-play units, as well as ways to increase scoring in modes like Arena or Arena Assault. Honestly, the amount handed out via PvE is pitiful. Not even enough for a single Grail unit at minimum price. We have yet another premium currency in the form of Trait Fruit, which can allow for some very useful fixing of boons. I think this is not a surprise to anyone, but a majority of these items will be found in the higher ranks of PvP modes. Then we have our final and most desired currency, Orbs. Now PvE completely blows PvP out of the water here, offering up to 5 times as many orbs. This also makes a ton of sense to me as a lot of the content in FEH is tied to summoning and new banners, so limiting players from accessing that is a good way to have people quit your game. Now what does this tell us when it comes to PvP versus PvE? To me it says that a majority of the premium currencies are tied to PvP game modes to give incentives for players to dive into those more difficult modes. Now I know that orbs are the most premium currency, but hear me out, they are purchasable. Yes, I know that all of these currencies have been purchasable at one point or another through limited time or packs or through the FEH Pass, but overall they are much more difficult to get. And while I and most people would choose orbs over most currencies, that doesn't mean they don't have a lot of value. After all, premium currencies like Dragon Flowers, Grails, Trait Fruits, and Divine Codes allow you to invest into your favorite characters and to improve your overall barracks. After looking at difficulty, availability, and rewards, what conclusion can we come to? I don't think it's as clear cut as people would have originally imagined. The game does have a lot of PvE content with good availability and good rewards. And as I think most people suspected, there is a ton of PvP modes that have high availability and great rewards as well. But the major thing I want people to take away from this video is that the game is sorely missing out on high difficulty or highly replayable PvE game modes that offer endgame resources like Dragon Flowers, Trait Fruits, and Grails. I would argue the main problem with Fire Emblem Heroes isn't the lack of PvE content, but the lack of endgame PvE content. The game opens up with a ton of PvE things to do, but as you finish hammering your way through the story and beating Abyssals, all that is left to do is the monthly events and PvP content, and that's what I think is the most problematic. Our next FEH report is going to cover the topic of why FEH is so PvP focused, and what are the downsides that come with that. If you enjoyed the video, please drop a like and subscribe, as it helps to keep the content coming out and helps the channel grow. This has been Oblivion, and I will catch you all later with more Fire Emblem Heroes.